Chapter 25. "So the others are kind of doing their own thing," explained Molly. Ben looked into her eyes. She knew that he did not believe her abbreviated story. He could tell there were omitted elements. She smiled to try and mask her anxiety. "The Key of Origins grants you the power to immediately access all the training and experience of your opponents," said Ben. "I don't understand why they would think your powers are unimportant." "Oh, it's not that they don't value me," said Molly. She struggled for words to satisfy his curiosity and put the matter to rest. Instead, an awkward silence that felt as though it lasted hours pervaded between them. "It's that you don't value yourself," whispered Ben at last. Molly's eyes widened. He had seen through her facade more easily than she had hoped. Slowly she lowered her head. "Well, Miss Patterson," said Ben with a smile, "you should." "Mr. Smith," said Molly in a low voice, "with respect, I wonder whether you are qualified to make such an assessment." She raised her head and looked at him. "Speaking of which, I never really found out why exactly you had come all this way." Ben smiled and reached into his shirt. Molly raised an eyebrow in confusion. Ben revealed a mirrored key similar to hers on a chain about his neck. Her eyes widened. "A 10th divine key?" gasped Molly. Ben nodded. "That throws everything out of balance." "No, it doesn't," said Ben confidently. "But there were 3 keys of omnipotence, 3 keys of omnipresence, and 3 keys of omniscience," said Molly in an excited voice. "What exactly is that? What does it do? Are there more? Did you get it from Jennifer Cedar?" "Hold on," laughed Ben. "I'll explain." "Please do," said Molly anxiously. Ben's smile faded. "It started a few years ago in Mexico," said Ben. "I had just lost my wife." "I'm sorry," said Molly sympathetically. "It was an accident," said Ben. "It was tragic, but there is no person who bears responsibility for it." "That is a respectable attitude, Mr. Smith," said Molly. "I've had several years with which to obtain my attitude about it," said Ben. "And you never married again?" asked Molly. She suddenly blushed as she realized how forward her question had seemed. Ben smiled. "No, Miss Patterson, I did not," he said. "But I did find this key in the sand of a Mexican beach. It was as though it spoke to me." "It called you," said Molly. "Yes, I guess that's right," said Ben. "That is the way it was with many of the divine keys and their bearers," said Molly. "I had a vision," said Ben. "A key of omniscience, then?" asked Molly. "Although the soul key gives something like visions, and it is a key of omnipresence." "I never thought to categorize it," said Ben. "I only know I saw a vision of a battle to the north. There was a man fighting a terrible creature. As he was fighting, he forged 10 keys. 9 of them stayed with a blonde-haired woman, but one of them was thrown far to the south." "The blonde-haired woman must be Jennifer Cedar," said Molly, "but she never knew about a 10th key." "Then perhaps you could help me," said Ben. "I'm trying to understand the purpose of this key, and you seem to have the ability to determine origins." "Okay," said Molly. She slowly approached Ben and gripped her key. Her eyes began glowing as she reached out and touched the key that rested on Ben's chest. It burst with light, and the ground shook as her fingers made contact with the shining mirrored surface. Ben winced at the overpowering light, but Molly did not look away. "Miss Patterson!" shouted Ben as a wind kicked up and began blowing dust and debris all around. The rustling of leaves in the trees became louder as Molly stared at the glowing key. She made no indication she heard Ben at all. Finally, Ben pulled her hand off of his key, and she immediately slumped down to the ground unconscious. "Miss Patterson!" shouted Ben as the light and sound and shaking ceased. He picked her up from the awkward position into which she had fallen and gently carried her to the water's edge. He carefully laid her down and got a handful of water. He pulled her head up and gently let the water drip into her mouth. She began coughing and choking and suddenly sat up. "Are you okay?" asked Ben. It took a few moments for her to get her bearings, but she finally recognized where she was and who was speaking to her. "Ben," she whispered in a frightened voice. "What did you see?" asked Ben. "Human sacrifice," said Molly. "You saw the demon worshippers?" "They weren't just demon worshippers," said Molly. "They were something different." "What then?" asked Ben. "I don't know," said Molly in an exasperated tone. "They were hooking people up to machines with tubes. They were screaming. Did you get any feeling for whether this was in the past, the present, or the future?" asked Ben. I don't know," said Molly, "but I think it was close by," she added. "What makes you say that?" asked Ben. "I saw a man there," she said. "I recognized him because I recently bought—" Molly stopped short, not wanting to admit she had purchased poison from him. Supplies from him. "Well, where was he?" asked Ben with a smile. "Let's find out who he is." Molly was uncomfortable with taking Ben, but the smile on his face eased her apprehension, and she finally smiled and nodded. It took several hours before they arrived at the small cart where she had met the shady salesman. While the cart was still there were no signs of anyone else. "Maybe he stepped out," suggested Molly. Ben pointed at an open container with coins on top of the cart. "And leave his money unprotected?" asked Ben. Molly raised an eyebrow. Something was not right. "What do you think happened?" asked Molly. Ben looked carefully at the ground and noticed broken bottles and a handkerchief a few yards away. "I think someone took him," said Ben as he pointed to them. The two of them headed in the direction of scuffed tracks. "This looks bad, Mr. Smith," said Molly cautiously. "I mean, what are we going to do if we find them?" "Is it okay to do nothing?" asked Ben. "Obviously this man was taken against his will. If we can help, shouldn't we? If we are able to make a difference for good, is it okay to not act?" "There are lots of good causes," said Molly. "We can't help everyone, and we can't help anyone if we are dead." "It won't hurt to see," said Ben. "Actually, it might," said Molly as she pointed to a black-cloaked man that slowly walked out from behind a tree with a rifle pointed at Ben. Ben turned around and lifted his hands into the air. "You've wandered too far," said the acolyte. "You have a black cloak," said Molly. "Are you one of Felix Light's?" "Hardly," laughed the acolyte. "Felix Light and the others in the so-called Archdemon's Hand organization lack vision and ambition." "But they hold the 5 great demon keys," said Molly. "Are you worried about me?" laughed the acolyte. "How sweet. But you should remember that I am the one holding the weapon." "Are you going to kill us?" asked Ben. "I would prefer not to," said the acolyte in a more serious tone. "At least not yet. You see, every life is precious. Every life has a purpose." Ben and Molly looked at one another in confusion. "A demon worshipper concerned with preserving life?" asked Molly. "Start moving down the trail," commanded the acolyte. "All will be explained in the Shrine of Abaddon."